Hey everyone. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way YouTube will keep showing you more stories just like this one. Alright, let's get started. The printer on my workbench finished printing the last laminated card. I took a utility knife and carefully trimmed the edges so the plastic wouldn't peel later when exposed to heat or steam in the kitchen. On each card were the same 7 rules, printed in clear, simple text with no decorations or fancy designs. I'd learned that guests actually read short, direct cards like this. Posters with pictures or too many words. People walk right past them. I slid the stack into my pack, along with spare batteries, a toolkit, a first aid kit, and a coil of nylon rope. The radio on the shelf hissed through static and landed on the county weather channel. Cold front tonight, rain turning to sleet in the higher hollows after midnight. Good news for the wells, bad news for people who think asphalt behaves the same in October as it does in July. Black Hollow Lodge sits at the end of a service road that climbs out of the old company town. 5 rental buildings, numbered, not named. The company built them for executives when coal still moved down the rails. Now they pay my mortgage. My grandfather worked here when there were still whistles and shift changes and men in black coats on payday. He left me the ledgers, the keys, and a way of talking to strangers that keeps people calm when things don't feel right. I took the 2-track past the gate and parked at Lodge 3. White paint, deep porch, tall windows. Solid cedar door with a bronze handle that never fit right in winter. I stepped up and touched the jamb out of habit. The wood felt damp and swollen. There was new damage on the lower hinge plate that hadn't been there last week, not rot. 4 shallow cuts, clean-edged, set in a diamond pattern, small enough to miss unless you knew where to look. I ran a fingernail across them. Crisp, no splinters. The knife that made them held its edge. I wrote it down in my pocket notebook by time, door, and weather. I take photos too, but ink holds better in my head. The ledger in the office has those shapes on at least 6 pages. Sometimes on wood, sometimes on stone. It isn't a letter anyone from here reads. Inside, the lodge smelled like Murphy oil soap and old pine. I walked through my routine. Tap the smoke detector. Test the carbon monoxide alarm. Reset the breaker for the back bedroom baseboard. Prop a rule card by the coffee maker, another on the dining table, and one on each nightstand. Replace the battery in the emergency radio and set it to channel 3. Check the generator enclosure for chew marks. Mice get bold when the nights turn. The rules fit on half a sheet. Doors and windows locked by dusk. No one opens the door after dark unless you see my face and hear my name. Cover mirrors that face outside after sundown. Do not follow voices you cannot see. Keep the radio on channel 3 when the weather is bad. If the porch light flickers, everyone stays in one room. When you leave, speak thanks aloud at the porch and shut the door. People ask about the 3rd rule. I do not tell them the whole story. I tell them reflections carry outside more than you think, and the glass can make a room look lived in when it isn't, which invites trespass. That is true. It isn't complete. I swapped out a dead bulb over the stove and fixed a latch that had started to misalign. A thin grit coated the sill of the back window. Not pollen, not dust. Black. I rubbed it and got a smell I know from the old breaker building where the conveyor used to run. Fine coal. There isn't an open pile anywhere on the property. The seam is sealed, and the last of the tailings got scraped away before my time. Coal dust still finds its way into places, or is carried. I took the ledger from my pack and held it open with my wrist while I worked. My grandfather's handwriting was straight and slow. The entry that drew me most wasn't old. November 2nd, 1971. Visitor at Lodge 2, knocked at 1:12 a.m. tall. Light behind it showed an outline. Called 2 guests by their middle names. Polite voice. Declined entry. Marks at hinge morning after. The weather station lost signal and came back. I shut it off and finished stocking wood on the porch. The reservation email had come through last night. The Reynolds family. Raleigh address. 4 nights at Lodge 3 starting Friday. 2 adults, 2 teens, 1 nephew. I circled nephew on the slip I keep in the glove box. Group dynamics matter. People pay attention differently when responsibility lands in a lap they didn't expect. By the time I drove down into town, the maples had turned deeper, and the road shone under low cloud. I stopped at the office for a stack of county maps, and to reply to the booking with a short note. Check-in directions. Gate code. My cell. Call or text for hikes. Trails can look straight forward and then turn on you. I try not to sound like a park sign. People filter warnings if they read compulsively. Home is a single-story place halfway between the Lodge Road and the old school. My kitchen table holds a coffee ring in a groove where a previous owner carved initials with a pocket knife. The ledger lives there when I can't shake a detail. I opened it again and flipped back farther than I usually go. June 14th, 1939. Marks on the side of the company house after a storm. 4 and a diamond. Mr. Dyer says boys with knives. I did not argue. October 28th, 1949. Voice at Lodge 1. Not a drunk. Spoke clearly. New names. Asked for shelter from the wind. Men refused. Coal dust on the sill in the morning. I didn't look any further. I have a limit for how much of the past I let into a day. I set the ledger aside, made a sandwich, and waited out the rain. The Reynolds family called from the turn at 3 in the afternoon. Tires popped on gravel 20 minutes later. Silver SUV, roof box, a small backpack jammed against the rear glass with a soccer ball peeking through the mesh. Everyone climbed out stiff and talking over each other. This is always the same. Every voice fights the road. The dad had a runner's build and a tone that said he tried to keep meetings under 30 minutes. You must be Nathan. Welcome to Black Hollow Lodge. I'm Nathan Cole. I keep the lights on. The mom had a triage way of scanning rooms. Hands are already sorting bags. I'm Dana. This is Aaron. That's Harper and Tate, and this is my sister's boy, Lucas. Harper wore a hoodie with a college on it and a look that told me she would read fast and retain everything she wanted to keep. Tate bounced once on the bottom step like he had spring in his ankles. Lucas had a camera strap across his chest and the alert posture of someone who hears things first. Any bear problems? Aaron asked. Always one of the first 3 questions. No. We get raccoons and stray dogs. Close the trash tightly. Don't leave food on the porch. What about hunters? Lucas asked. Season hasn't opened for rifle. You'll see trucks. You'll hear shots farther off. Nobody hunts this property. The game warden has my number, and I have his. Inside, I walked them through the systems and pointed out where the breaker box was. Dana checked outlets. Aaron put the Wi-Fi password into his phone. Harper stood at the kitchen and read the rule card out loud, without a flourish. Tate asked if he could feed the chipmunks. I answered the questions in order. No leaving food for anything. Yes to hiking, but I would keep them off the south drainage after rain. The shale cleaves and drops without sound. Yes to fishing at the reservoir with a county permit. No to swimming. The bottom hides rebar and old metal, and the water numbs hands in 8 minutes. Harper pointed at Rule 3. Why the mirrors? Reflections give the wrong impression at night. Glass invites attention. People see a lamp and a movement, and they make up a story about it. The wrong person knocks if they think a place is unwatched. She nodded once. She understood the part I said. I didn't say the rest. Lucas stood at the back door and peered through the glass. What's that powder on the sill? He rubbed it with a fingertip and smelled it before I could stop him. His face changed. He knew that smell from a science museum or a train display. Coal dust, I said. From where? Old buildings on the far side of the ridge. Wind finds ways. Dana touched the cabinets once, as if taking ownership before cooking a meal. That gesture always tells me a family will fight for a place if anything tests them. She had the look of someone who would do compressions for 20 minutes without stopping and then get up and do dishes. They took the bigger back bedroom and gave the front rooms to the kids. I made sure everyone had my number and the card from the office with the landline list. Cell works on the porch and in the yard if the cloud cover behaves. The service turns off like a switch when the pressure changes. We're going to run the river loop before it gets dark, Aaron said. Anything we should know? It looks flat on the map. The far side drops to the creek and climbs hard. If you hear a whistle in the trees, that's wind in the cut. It carries. What kind of whistle? Tate asked. A long one. You'll know it. Out on the porch, I pointed them toward the trailhead and waited until they were on it before I walked around the lodge one more time. On the north side, near the utility box, the same diamond of shallow cuts had appeared on the siding at knee height. New, the edges were clean, and there was a scatter of pale chips on the ground. I put one in an envelope for the office file and took a photo with the rule card in frame for scale. The wind moved in the hemlocks behind the lodge without sound on the porch. The quiet up here isn't empty. It is still, and the stillness tells you when something is awake that wasn't awake before. I have learned to treat that quiet as a status report. Today, it said the hollow was paying attention. I drove back to the office and uploaded the photos with the time embedded. I printed a second set of rule cards and left them in my bag. The radio brought the weather back up, freeze line around the lookout, mixed precipitation after 1 in the morning. I pulled the ledger down from the shelf and turned to a page that I avoid unless I need it. January 5th, 1984. Child at Lodge 4 reported a man with a white face in the window. No prints in the snow, smudge on glass, dust on the sill, 4 new marks at the hinge plate. The page had a finger smudge my grandfather never cleaned. He was tidy and steady. The print makes the entry worse. The Reynolds family came back before dusk with wet shoes and red cheeks. They were loud and hungry, good signs. Families that go quiet too soon tend to sit in rooms and hear every sound and build a story they can't climb down from. After they went in, I stood on the porch and watched the light fade across the ridge. The old Tipple foundation stands far back in the trees. The shape is almost gone now, under green and rust. A breeze picked up and dropped. No birds called. The first drops hit the roof and spread into a steady patter. I locked the porch shed, checked the generator fuel, and left the porch light on. At home, I set the ledger by the sink and made stew. I kept the radio on channel 3 and turned my phone face up on the table. I don't sleep heavy when a cold front hits this place. Doors swell, hinges moan. Deadbolts take extra force. Guests blame themselves when wood refuses them. They think they broke something. I tell them to pull hard, and they apologize. I don't mind apologies. I might be missing a call. The first text came in at 9:37 p.m. from Dana. Is there a train near here? I typed back that there is a track but no scheduled freight on weekends. I asked what she heard. One long whistle, far off. Then again. I told her wind can catch in the old rock cuts and carry a tone. I didn't tell her that the ledger has a list of nights when the wind had no business making a tuned sound. I set my boots on the rug by the door and checked the gas in the truck. The rain made a soft hiss on the glass. The house settled once. The clock read 10:51 when the power blinked and came back. I watched for the second blink and didn't get it. At 11:18, my phone buzzed again. Lucas this time. Is someone else renting up here? I called him because text slows down information when I need it fast. Where are you? I said. Kitchen. Everyone's in the living room. I went to get water. There was a light down in the trees, and then it went out. Flashlight? Maybe. Or a phone. Any headlights? No. Lock the back door. Stay away from the windows. Put the radio on 3. I'm on my way. Don't go outside. The rain switched to sleet as I drove. The service road went slick, and the wipers chattered. I kept the truck in low and pointed the nose at the ruts I knew by feel. The gate hung wrong from the last freeze. The padlock clanked against the metal and swung. I stopped before the porch and shut the engine. There weren't any other vehicles. The sleet made a smooth gloss on the steps. No boot marks. No tracks on the yard. The porch light hummed. The light over the kitchen sink glowed through the curtains. I knocked 3 times and said my name. Dana opened the door fast and pulled me in. She already had everyone gathered in the living room. I could smell damp wool and coffee. Harper had the radio in her lap. Aaron stood in front of the front window with his shoulders set like a line coach. Lucas watched the back of the house as if he expected movement. What did you see? I asked Lucas. He held up his phone and showed me a clip. A pale shape down the slope held steady for 5 seconds and then slid away. Not a beam, not a match to any headlamp I know. The light didn't spin or bounce. It held, then it went out like someone pinched it between finger and thumb. Did you hear anything? I asked. Harper answered. Wind. A whistle earlier. The porch light blinked once. Everyone goes to one room if it blinks twice, I said. We don't need to worry until it does. Aaron nodded at the door. We heard clicks. Where? The back door. 3. Even spacing. I went there and found the same 4 cuts in the hinge plate. Fresh. The metal is bright inside the grooves. The door frame had a new hairline split the length of my first finger. The air at the crack smelled faintly of damp and something iron. I checked the window locks and slid a sheet over the hall mirror. Is there something we need to know that isn't on that card? Dana asked. No drama. Straight question. There are nights when people hear a voice on the porch. I said. It speaks clearly. It uses names. It asks for help. We don't open the door. We don't answer. If I am not the one knocking, you wait it out. Has it ever gotten in? Harper asked. Not while people followed the rules. She watched me for a second and filed the answer. I sat with them until the sleet turned back to rain. At 12:40 a.m., the radio on Harper's lap crackled to life on its own and hissed in a pattern that could have been fabric hand. She flicked the volume down. I held up a hand. We listened. Nothing more came. When I left, I chalked the hinge plate without making a show of it and set a piece of tape on the back door jamb so I would know if pressure changed. The rain softened when I stepped off the porch. I turned the flashlight off and let my eyes adjust. Down near the old rail bed, a pale oval hung among tree trunks for half a breath, then cut out. No beam, no source, only the front of something that reflected, not shone. I stood still until my shoulders hurt. The yard held no new marks when I swept it. I drove out with the radio on and the wipers off because I wanted the sound of the road more than I wanted a clear windshield. Back at my table, I opened the ledger to a blank page and wrote the time, the weather, the new marks, and the shape of light in the trees. I left a space for whatever came next and went to bed with my boots by the door. The house woke me once when a branch shed ice and hit the roof in pieces. The furnace cycled before dawn, and the first birds started at 7. The sky held to a slate color that makes the porch light look useful long after sunrise. At 9, the family drove into town for groceries, and I went back to Lodge 3 alone. The tape on the jamb had a new crease. The chalk lines on the hinge had 3 fresh smears where metal moved against metal. The back windowsill held a new smear of black dust. I took another envelope and labeled it with the date. The ledger waited open in my pack with room for a word I have never been able to write down for this place. I didn't write it. I closed the pack and set the rule card upright again on the table in case anyone nudged it. I said thanks out loud in the empty kitchen and walked out. The wind died. The yard went still. The quiet pressed in against the walls and then let go. I locked the door and felt the deadbolt seat. It held solid and heavy under my hand. I drove home and set water to boil. The forecast promised sleet after midnight. The ledger already had a page ready for it. The rain ran steadily through the evening and hardened on the ridge before midnight. I dozed in a chair with the radio whispering and the phone on the armrest. I woke with my hand already moving for it when it buzzed. The time read 1:07 a.m. The caller ID said Dana, Lodge 3. I answered. Nathan. Her voice was a whisper with a lid on it. There's someone at the back door. Where is everyone? In the hallway. We pulled the beds in. The radio is on. Do not answer the door. Do not say anything. I'm leaving now. Stay on the line. I put on my boots and the coat by the door and was out in the truck before the call hit the first long minute. The windshield was beaded with ice at the corners. The road up held under low gear. The sleet made a soft grind under the tires. The service gate swung on its hinge and thumped once against the post. What are you hearing? I asked. Knocking. 3. Even. Then a pause. She held the phone toward the sound. I heard the knocks through the speaker. Solid. Not a fist. Not a flat palm. 3 taps with the same force, the same spacing, the same finish on the wood at the end of each strike. The kind of rhythm that a metronome can do all night without a missed beat. A voice followed, clear under the eaves. I'm sorry to bother you. I lost my way in the rain. Please let me come inside and warm up. Dana pulled the phone back. Her breath was steady. He sounds normal. The voice came again. No strain, no cough, no shiver. Mrs. Dana Reynolds. Mr. Aaron Reynolds. Harper, Tate, Lucas, please. I will not stay. I only need a moment to stand out of the wind. I took the next bend too fast and corrected. Do not answer. I'm close. Aaron came on the line without me asking. He knows our names. Stay away from the door, I said. Stand where he can't trace your feet and mirror them. What does that mean? He follows placement. If he hears a step, he reads where you are. Another 3 knocks. The same force, the same spacing. Nathan Cole, the voice said. You left your kitchen light on. Dana whispered. How does he know that? Because I did, I said, and kept driving. The porch light at Lodge 3 made a yellow cone in the sleet. The yard looked clean. No tracks. I killed the truck lights before I reached the steps and coasted in the last 10 feet. The knock stopped when my tires crunched. I rolled the window down. The sound of the sleet was plain now, fast and fine. Nathan, Dana said, I'm here. Stay put. Don't speak. I got out and stood where I could see the side of the house and the back door at the same time. The night was bright enough under the low cloud to show shapes. A pale oval hovered 6 feet off the ground at the corner by the kitchen. Not a lantern, a face shape that held light. It did not move toward me or away. It did not blink. "Nathan Cole," the voice said again. "Your middle name is James." I didn't answer. I took 2 steps to the right and raised the beam of my light to the level of the porch rail. The pale oval didn't flinch. The beam picked up details I did not want. A flat front, no features. A rigid plane with a faint texture like paper that has been smoothed by the same hand again and again. No mouth that I could see. No nose. The voice did not come from a hole. It came through the surface as if a speaker sat behind the plane. "Please," it said. "This is not a trick. The rain is cold." I saw the edge of it then. The oval wasn't a head. Something wore it. The edge had 2 small buckles and straps that vanished into the dark. The body behind the face stood taller than the door frame. The shoulders were wrong, too high. The posture didn't shift weight. There was no breath in the chest. The sleet struck and slid off. I stepped backward and kept the light low. The thing turned to track the door, not me. It raised an arm. The hand that came into light had joints in the right places and a palm that looked human until the finger lengths registered out of sequence. The ring finger extended farther than the middle finger. The little finger had a knuckle too many. The hand touched the door near the latch. The wood gave a quiet sound. The deadbolt held. 3 knocks. The same force. The same spacing. "Only a moment," the voice said. "I can pay." "You can leave," I said. I kept my voice level and firm. "There is no door for you." It did not turn to face me. It angled the paper face toward the glass of the kitchen door instead. The pane showed our porch light and the long shape under the eaves. For a second, a smear of coal dust ran down the inside of the glass, as if stroked from the outside. "Please," it said, and the word held the same tone as the first time. No wear, no edge, no impatience. It could have said that word for a week without a change. Inside, the radio crackled and hissed in a tight burst. The voice outside stopped. The head shifted to the side. It listened. The radio steadied on the weatherman's voice about sleet at higher elevations. The paper face went still again. "Your grandfather promised," the voice said. "It is cold." "My grandfather kept people alive," I said. "So will I. Leave this porch." It stood very straight and let the sleet slide down the face. I kept the beam on the rail. I don't show things that I don't want reflected back at me. The porch light flickered once and held. Inside, I heard Dana move the girls farther down the hall. Aaron's shoes made a single sound and then went quiet. The paper face drifted a step away from the door. The body did not show effort. The movement had no push in the knees or lift in the feet. It just shifted placement. It turned the face toward the front of the house. For a breath, the oval filled with my reflection in miniature. Eyes, mouth, hat brim. Then the surface went dead again. It moved along the wall and left no prints on the yard. The sleet should have taken an impression. There was nothing. The only marks came at the hinge plate and the jamb, where the metal brushed against metal with a pressure you can't mistake if you have hung a door more than once. I waited until the oval cleared the corner and then went to the front steps and listened. The porch light hummed. The sleet clicked on the rail. The yard stood without any movement. Across the road, the hemlock stood in a dark wall. The oval did not show among them. The radio inside made a tiny sound at the edge of range, like a hand resting on fabric. I knocked 3 times on the door and said my name. Aaron opened and let me in. He had a fireplace poker in his hand, not raised. Dana stood behind him with a flashlight. Harper held Tate, and Lucas kept his camera pointed down. "What is it?" Tate asked. The question came out thin and controlled. "Someone who wants in at night," I said. "We don't let anyone in at night." "It knew your middle name," Harper said. "I heard." "How?" Lucas asked. "I don't know." We stood in the hall and listened. The knocking did not return. The radio sat quietly. The porch light did not blink. We waited 10 minutes and then 20. I put my ear to the wall and heard only the furnace and the thin slide of water in the downspout. "I'll sit the rest of the night on the porch," I said. "If you hear knocks again, call my name and wait. Do not answer the door." Aaron nodded and moved furniture to block the hallway and the front door. Dana gathered blankets. Harper covered the mirror in the front room with a towel and tape. Tate pressed his palms into his knees and breathed in through the nose and out through the mouth. Lucas wrote the time on his hand with a marker and then wrote it again on a scrap of paper as if he did not trust his skin. I took the chair on the porch with my coat zipped to the chin and the radio on my lap. The sleet ticked on the roof and ran down in threads. The porch light threw a small circle on the wet boards. The trees held steady. Once, something thin crossed the yard at a speed that read as wrong. Not fast enough for an animal. Not slow enough for a person. I couldn't fix the shape. The sleet made a veil, and whatever moved used it. At 2:12 a.m. the radio hissed, and a voice came through that wasn't the weatherman. It wasn't the paper face either. It sounded like the last breath of someone who swallowed water. A single word pushed out and fell apart. Cold. I turned the volume down and kept the antenna in the same place. The voice didn't come again. The weatherman started listing road closures. I sat until 4:40, when the sleet turned back to rain and the cold backed off. The porch light kept its steady hum. Inside, the family dozed in a chain across the floor. Dana had one hand on Tate's back. Harper slept with her head against the base of the couch. Lucas sat with his eyes open and his camera strap over his shoulder, awake not because he couldn't sleep, but because he had decided not to. I walked the yard at first light. The rain softened the crust over the ground and turned the top layer to a gloss. You can read feet and hooves and paws when the earth keeps a memory. The yard held nothing. The porch steps held a thin wash where the water ran. The only marks were new lines in the hinge plate on the back door and a shallow scrape on the jamb by the latch, where metal had pressed and moved, and then stopped. The diamond of cuts on the siding had a cousin now near the kitchen window. Same pattern, same depth. I took photos and bagged a new coal smear from the sill. The coal dust looked uniform until it hit the light. Then it showed flecks I didn't like. Mica, tiny metallic grains, fine white fibers. The old mask material from the company storeroom had that texture. I set the bag down and went to the ledger in my pack. February 9th, 1955. Ford and marks on the kitchen sill. Dust present. Fibers. Mask seen on face. Do not address. Do not join the voice. Promise in 1932 not renewed. I had read that line 5 times and never understood what it meant. The word promise sits on the page with my grandfather's slow hand on it. He didn't underline. He didn't add a note. He wrote it and left it there. The family woke to coffee and the sound of water coming off the eaves. Aaron came out with his mug and stood a foot inside the door. Did it come back? He asked. No. Did it go away? Not in any way I can prove. He stared at the yard. I thought I saw a face. A white oval. No features. I saw it. That didn't look human. No. And it spoke. Yes. It sounded polite. It did. He nodded and took a drink he didn't want. What now? You stay. You keep the radio on. You keep the mirrors covered after dark. You do not answer the door. I'll be nearby. I'm going to look at a place up the ridge when the weather lifts. What place? An old air shaft. Dana came to the door and listened with the eyes she uses at work. What are you hoping to find? A mark. A story somebody left. A reason. Does it help? It helps me. She pressed her lips together and nodded once. Harper passed a plate to Tate and took one for herself. Lucas opened his camera and checked the card. He didn't raise it. I left them with the door locked and the radio turned up enough to cover small sounds. Out in the yard, the rain slowed. The clouds lifted a little and showed the tree line sharp against a gray sky. Up past the bend, a stand of hemlock blocks a forgotten path to the company's emergency vent. It is a short walk when the ground holds. It is longer when the mud sucks at your boots and the brush tugs your sleeves. I took the old path and listened for the sound of water underground. There is a seam back there that leaks after storms. It smells sharp and stale. Miners knew this place and stayed out of it when the charge lines went dead and the roof worked. I reached the vent cover and found the grill bent at one corner. Rust, not fresh force. Something had lifted it once and set it back. On the concrete ring, 4 shallow cuts sat in a diamond pattern at the same spacing as the ones on the lodge. The edges had softened from rain. The mark had age. It wasn't new. I put my palm over it and felt the chill from the shaft below come up through the concrete. My breath made a small cloud and faded. I stood there until the rain picked up again. Then I put the grill back the way it was and turned toward the lodge. On the way down, my phone buzzed 3 times with weak service and then delivered a text. It came from a number I didn't have. The first word was my first name. The second was my middle name. The third was my last name. No punctuation. No greeting. I stared at it until the service dropped again, and the bar turned red. When the message reloaded by the road, a second text followed. Renew the promise. I drove to town with the wipers on high and the radio off. The office felt small when I unlocked it. I pulled the oldest ledger from the shelf and carried it to the table. The binding cracked when it opened to a page with a date I hadn't seen before. April 3rd, 1932. Agreement with the Hollow, held by Mr. Archer. Bread and salt were left at the vent. Names spoken. The door kept shut at night. Passage kept open in the storm for the ones underneath. Protection given in return. Renewed by winter and by the first cold. Last renewal missed after the flood took the road. I read it twice, and then I read it out loud. The air in the office felt tight at the end of the second reading, as if the room understood a part of it. I copied the words on a card and put it in my pocket. I checked the clock and the weather and the roads. The family would be awake with the radio on and the door locked. The day would pass, the night would come. I would sit in a chair on the porch again. I would listen for the knock. I laminated a fresh card and wrote a new line at the bottom of the rules. Not a different rule, an addition to the 7th. I kept the language simple. No poetry, no claims. Just what my hands knew how to do. Thank the Hollow. Leave bread and salt on the porch before you shut the door. I looked at the words and waited for the feeling I get when I put something wrong into the world. It didn't come. The room stayed ordinary. The clock ticked. The rain hit the window and ran. I put the new card in my pack and drove uphill through the last of the morning drizzle. The porch at Lodge 3 stood clear under the overhang. The hinge plate had stopped cutting. The jamb held. The coal dust on the sill sat in a thin line. I set a small plate by the step and covered it with a towel. I would explain later. People are more likely to do uncomfortable work when it already looks halfway done. Inside, Dana handed me a list of groceries for the afternoon. It wasn't long. Bread, salt, coffee, batteries. She looked at the plate and at me. She didn't ask the question out loud. I said I would be back before dark and left with my pack and the card. On the road down, the hemlocks lifted and dropped. The wind worked in the cut without voice. The service bar flickered and held. The same unknown number texted once. For now, the words sat on the screen until the vibration motor cooled. I put the phone face down and drove with both hands on the wheel. The ledger on the seat slid and thumped once against the door. The rain started again. The day held steady under it. The same weight from doorstep to ridge and back. The night would shift that weight. The knock would come. The face would show. I had a rule card and a plate, and a line from a page almost 100 years old. I do not promise things I can't deliver. I could not promise quiet nights. I could promise a door that holds and a company on the porch, and a voice that did not flinch. The Hollow keeps its own calendar. The first cold wakes things that sleep underground and inside walls and under boards. Some ask politely, some never learn how. The polite ones are easier to write rules for. I checked the mirror and drove toward the store and the place by the bakery where the shelves still hold plain loaves and a paper carton of salt. The day felt ready, not safe. Ready. The Reynolds family stayed inside most of the second day. The rain kept the ridge wrapped in low fog, and the wind dragged a whistle through the cuts that made every window pane buzz. I came up mid-morning with the groceries and the new rule card laminated and ready. Dana met me at the door with her sleeves rolled up, like she had been cooking even though the stove was cold. She read the card without a word and slid it under a magnet on the refrigerator. Bread, salt. She had already set a plate on the counter. "Is this supposed to keep something out?" she asked. "It keeps us honest," I said. Her eyes weighed that answer. She didn't push. She folded the towel neatly and set it beside the plate. Aaron had his laptop open on the dining table, half a spreadsheet glowing on the screen. "Wi-Fi's crawling, but it works," he said. "Harper and Lucas want to hike when the rain lets up. Any trails safe? Stay on the ridge path. Don't drop into the South Hollow. It holds water and doesn't give it back." Lucas nodded like he'd already planned it. Harper glanced at me, sharp and questioning, and then wrote something in a notebook. The house smelled like damp wood and soap. The kids had moved mirrors into closets without me asking. The towel still hung over the hallway glass. Rules stick faster when the first night feels wrong. Before I left, I checked the back sill again. The coal dust had shifted. New streaks angled like a fingertip had traced through it. I bagged another sample. Dana saw me do it, but didn't ask. She already knew questions were heavier than answers in this place. Back in the office, I opened the oldest ledger. The 1932 agreement page stared up like it wanted me to try harder. I turned forward. October 1933. Bread and salt left. No knocks this winter. Snow deep. Passage clear. November 1936. Renewed. Voices quiet. Men safe in the storm. January 1939. Forgot the bread. Dust at the sill. Promise repeated. Knock returned. The words kept circling the same rhythm. Promise made. Peace kept. Promise missed. Visits returned. At the bottom of one page in 1941, my grandfather had written a line I had never noticed, smudged under ink that bled from the paper above. It is not hunger, it is permission. Permission. I copied it down and set it in my pocket. That night, the rain slacked enough for the kids to walk the ridge with flashlights. They came back laughing, wet from mist but unshaken. Tate carried a stick like a sword. Harper and Lucas shared the camera, clicking shots of trees wrapped in fog. Inside, the porch light blinked once, while they were still peeling off boots. Dana froze with her hands on the laces. Aaron stared at me. I shook my head. One blink, not two. They ate soup together at the table. The radio hummed steadily on Channel 3. No interference, no whispers. I stood by the porch after they settled into their beds. The rain hit steadily but lightly. At 12:11 a.m., the radio cracked again. The hiss bent into a voice. Not the paper mask this time. A man's tone, rough and uneven. Renew it. I picked up the handset and pressed the talk button. What do you want renewed? Static. Then the same voice. Bread. Salt. Thanks. Door shut. The rain made the rest of the night sound softer. No knocks. No smears. Just the steady sense of something waiting for my reply. At dawn, the porch rail had a new mark. Not a diamond. 3 lines cut deep and parallel, angling inward. A sign I'd seen in the ledger sketches. My grandfather had drawn it once with shaking lines and called it claim. The second night brought cold instead of rain. The temperature dropped with no wind, just a heavy stillness that pressed on the lodge like a weight. The family played cards at the dining table. Dana laughed once, sharp and tired but real. Aaron dealt slowly, watching the kids. Harper kept glancing at the rule card on the fridge, like it might add lines while she wasn't looking. At 10:46, the porch light flickered twice. Everyone froze. Inside, one room, I said. Now. We pulled the beds into the hallway, same as the first night. Dana herded Tate and Harper. Lucas carried the radio and his notebook. Aaron shoved the dresser against the back door. We waited. The house settled once. Then 3 knocks on the front door, spaced exactly. A voice followed. Not polite this time, flat. Open. Nobody moved. The voice came again, louder. Open. Then silence. The porch light buzzed back to steady. Dana whispered, "It's testing us." I didn't answer. At 1:12 a.m., scratching started along the siding. Slow, deliberate. It circled the lodge once, twice. On the third pass, it dragged across the kitchen window. When I checked later, the coal dust on the sill had been disturbed again. A clean space in the middle, like a hand had pressed flat. The radio hissed. Harper clutched it. The static folded into words again. This time, a woman's voice. "Keep the promise." Lucas wrote the words fast. His pen dug into the page hard enough to tear it. The scratching stopped after 3 passes. No more knocks. The rest of the night went quietly, but nobody slept. At first light, I walked the perimeter. New marks on the siding. Not diamonds. Not parallel lines. This time, a shape like a cross. 4 cuts meeting at the middle, carved deep enough to bleed resin. In the ledger, I found the same shape sketched under October 1955. My grandfather's note. Cross-cut. A warning. Next night, stronger. I shut the book and set my hand on the cover until the quiet in the room let go. The Reynolds family had 3 nights left. The morning after the cross mark, the hollow felt wrong. Still, but not restful, like the ridge was holding its breath. I met the Reynolds family in the kitchen. Everyone looked pale, eyes rimmed red. Nobody had slept. Dana handed me coffee without speaking. Aaron traced the rule card on the fridge with his finger. Harper sat with her notebook shut, refusing to write another word until she understood what she'd already written. Lucas finally broke the silence. "What does the promise mean?" I told them what the ledger said in 1932. Bread. Salt. Thanks. Door shut. An exchange. Respect for protection. "So we just leave food out?" Aaron asked. "It isn't about food," I said. "It's about permission." Harper's eyes narrowed. Permission for what? I didn't answer because I didn't know. By noon, the fog lifted and the ridge lay open. I told them I needed to see something up the trail. Harper and Lucas came with me. Dana stayed back with Tate. We climbed toward the old vent shaft. The mud had dried into ruts. The hemlocks leaned over the cut like they didn't want to show what was underneath. The grill sat bent where I'd seen it before. Coal dust smeared across the concrete in fresh streaks. Someone had touched it last night. Lucas crouched, camera ready. Harper ran her fingers over the cuts. "These are old," she said. "Some are," I told her. "Not all." She pulled her hand back and wiped it on her jeans like the stone had burned her. Lucas snapped photos, one after another. Then he stopped and lowered the camera. "There are marks inside." He wasn't wrong. Symbols ran down the shaft wall, parallel lines, diamonds, crosses, repeating in patterns that bent your eyes if you looked too long. Harper whispered, "It's a language." The ledger's sketches matched. My grandfather had seen these, but he never said how. He never wrote whether he stood here, or if someone told him. The wind rose from the shaft. It didn't smell like air. It smelled like wet coal and rusted iron, sharp enough to sting. "Time to go," I said. That evening, Dana had set the bread and salt on the porch plate before I got back. She didn't ask. She didn't want to. In the dark, the radio hissed once and settled. The porch light held steady. No knocks came before midnight. For the first time since they arrived, the night stretched without interruption. But in the morning, 3 new diamonds were carved on the porch rail, one for each person who had gone to the shaft. Harper stared at them, her face tight. "It knows exactly who we are." "Yes," I said, "and now it's paying attention." The third night fell colder. Frost rimmed the porch posts. The hollow held sound like a shell. The family stayed close in the hallway. The radio hummed steadily. Dana kept her hands on Tate's shoulders. Aaron sat against the wall with the poker across his knees. Lucas had his camera in his lap, but didn't lift it. Harper just stared at the rule card she'd copied into her notebook. At 12:23 a.m., the first knock came. Not 3 this time. 1. A heavy strike that shook the frame. Then silence. Another knock. Harder. The porch light flickered once. The radio hissed, and a voice spoke through. Not the paper-face tone. Not the drowning whisper. This was different. A chorus. Many voices speak the same words at the same time. Renew the promise. The bread and salt sat on the porch plate, under the towel. Dana whispered, "We did." The chorus answered through the radio. Not enough. The porch light flickered twice. Everyone froze. Scratching began on the siding. Faster this time. Circling, clawing. The sound of metal dragged on wood. Then a voice outside, clear as any neighbor at the door. "Nathan Cole, James, you are the keeper now. Speak it." I stepped toward the door, my chest tight. "Speak what?" "Permission," the voice said. The scratching stopped. Silence pressed against the lodge so hard my ears rang. The radio hissed again. The chorus returned. "Say it, or we claim." Behind me, Harper whispered, "Don't." But the porch light flickered 3 times, and the deadbolt groaned. Wood split along the frame. The promise from 1932 wasn't just ritual. It was binding. It had been broken too long. I pressed my palm against the door. The coal dust smell poured through the cracks. In the ledger, my grandfather had written it plain. Bread, salt, thanks. Door shut. I said the words aloud. The scratching stopped. The knocks ended. The porch light steadied. Silence dropped heavy and complete. Dana whispered, "Did it work?" The radio hissed one last time, and the chorus said, "For now." Then nothing. We stayed together until dawn, nobody daring to close their eyes. When light finally broke, I checked the porch. The plate was empty. No bread, no salt. Only 3 fresh cuts were carved into the wood. Parallel, deep, each one pointing toward the door. The family had 2 nights left. Morning came gray and brittle. Frost still clung to the porch where the 3 new cuts pointed at the door. The Reynolds family stood behind me as I traced them with my finger. Dana asked first, "So we did what the promise said. Why did it mark us again?" "Because it isn't about bread or salt," I said. "It's about who keeps the door closed." Aaron muttered, "We kept it closed." Harper shook her head. "It wants you to keep it, Nathan. You're the one it talks to." She wasn't wrong. Back in the office, I pulled out my grandfather's ledger again. There were dozens of notes I'd read before, but one page at the very back had stayed shut under warped paper. I peeled it open with my thumb. October 1961. His handwriting was still steady then. Renewal complete. My father spoke it. The hollow kept quiet. They will come again if no one repeats. Underneath that, a second hand. My father's, shaking even then. 1978. No one left to speak it. I will not. The hollow may claim. That was the last page. Nothing after. I closed the book. The weight of it felt heavier than paper. That night, the family wanted to leave. The SUV was half packed before Dana stopped in the driveway and stared at me. If we go, what happens? You might not make it off the ridge, I said. People have tried. The ledger has those notes too. Tate cried then. Harper pulled him back inside. Dana shut the trunk. So they stayed. I sat on the porch with the rifle across my lap. The frost deepened. The radio hummed in my pocket. At 11:47, the first knock came. 3 taps even, patient. The paper-face voice followed. Please, only a moment. I said nothing. Another 3 taps. The same words. Inside, Tate whimpered. Dana hushed him, voice steady but thin. The porch light flickered once. Twice. I rose, heart thudding, and put my palm flat against the door. Coal dust leaked through the cracks again, dry and sharp. Renew it, the voice said. I whispered, bread, salt, thanks, door shut. Silence stretched. The porch light steadied, but then the voice spoke again, softer. Not enough. Not from you. The wood groaned. The deadbolt bent. I could hear the metal shift. The radio hissed in my pocket. A whisper cut through. Not a chorus, not polite, just one word. Tomorrow. Then the night fell silent. The family barely spoke the next day. Everyone moved quietly, as if noise itself might invite attention. Dana still made breakfast. Aaron checked the generator twice. Harper wrote nothing. Lucas kept his camera in his lap, but didn't raise it. Tate wouldn't leave Dana's side. I drove into town and bought a fresh loaf of bread and a full box of salt. I carried them back up the ridge myself. At dusk, I placed them on the porch plate, under a towel. Dana watched me through the glass, her face set in a nurse's mask of control. At 12:06 a.m., the first sound came. Not knocking, not scratching. Footsteps. Slow, heavy. Walking the full circle of the lodge. Boards creaked under weight that didn't belong. The porch light flickered once. Then a knock. Single, hard enough to shake the frame. The paper-face voice came through. Clear. Calm. Joseph Nathan Cole. Keeper. Speak it. Stand with us. My chest went cold. It didn't use my middle name this time. It used the one I hadn't told anyone. The one written only in my birth record. Nobody alive knew it. Inside, Aaron whispered, "Don't answer." But the deadbolt groaned. Wood split. A hairline crack raced down the jamb. I put my palm against it. Bread. Salt. Thanks. Door shut. The voice whispered back. Softer now, right against the wood. No. Promise in blood. Or we claim. Behind me, Tate started to cry again. Harper held him. Dana's hand clamped over his mouth. The porch light flickered twice, then 3 times. The door bent under a weight I couldn't see. The wood screamed. Coal dust sifted through the crack, dry as ash. The radio hissed. A dozen voices spoke through at once. Tomorrow. Final. The weight on the door lifted. The porch light steadied. Silence returned. Nobody moved. Nobody slept. By dawn, the bread and salt were gone. In their place sat 3 new symbols carved into the porch rail. Not diamonds, not lines, not crosses. Circles. 3 of them, tight and deliberate. In the ledger, circles always meant one thing. Claim. The morning after the circles, the air in the hollow felt dead. No birds, no wind. The frost clung to branches until noon, then melted all at once, leaving everything dripping. The Reynolds family stayed close. Dana had circles under her eyes as dark as bruises. Aaron tried to keep busy, cleaning the stove and checking the locks, but his hands shook every time he stopped moving. Harper sat on the floor with Tate, teaching him a card game. Lucas barely spoke at all, but his camera never left his lap. When evening came, Dana asked the question she'd been holding back. What happens if you don't speak the promise tonight? I looked at her. The ledger says claim. Families disappear, cars found with doors open, no one inside. And if you do, then maybe it holds. For another year. She nodded once, then she set her jaw like she did at work. Then you'll say it. The night fell fast. By 11:30, the hollow was black as pitch. The porch light buzzed and glowed weakly against the dark. At 11:59, the first knock came. Hard, solid, then another. 3 in perfect rhythm. The paper-face voice followed. "Keeper, Joseph Nathan Cole, speak the promise." I held the words in my mouth. Bread, salt, thanks. Door shut. The porch light flickered once, twice, 3 times. Then the door bent inward. Wood groaning, bolts straining. A seam split down the middle. Coal dust poured through, choking the air. The voice came again. Not polite now. Commanding. Not words, blood. The chorus rose on the radio. 100 voices layered into one. Blood. Promise. The door frame shuddered. Dana pulled Tate into the hall. Harper grabbed Lucas and dragged him back. Aaron stood with the poker raised, useless against what pressed on the other side. I pressed my hand flat against the crack. The wood bit my palm. I thought of my grandfather's notes. My father's refusal, the circle marks carved into the rail. Permission. Not hunger. Permission. I took the knife from my belt and cut my palm, pressing it against the split wood. Blood smeared into the grain. The pressure stopped. Silence. The coal dust smell thinned. The porch light steadied. The voice whispered. Close. Gentle. Promise renewed. Then it was gone. The door held, cracked but standing. My hand bled into the grain. The house fell still. We stayed awake until dawn. No more knocks. No more voices. On the porch, the plate sat empty again. In its place, a new mark was carved deep into the rail. A circle closed tight. But inside it, a cross. The ledger never showed that shape. Not once. The Reynolds family packed at sunrise. No one argued this time. Dana loaded the SUV with methodical speed. Aaron carried bags without speaking. Harper stayed quiet, her notebook shut tight in her arms. Tate clung to his mother. Lucas finally raised his camera and snapped one photo of the lodge before sliding it back into his pack. Before they left, Dana took my hand, careful to avoid the bandage. "You kept us alive. I don't know what you gave it, but you did." I said nothing. They drove down the ridge and out of sight. Back in the office, I opened the ledger and wrote the date. Promise renewed. Blood spoken. Circle with cross returned. I sat with the book open, the air heavy in the room. My grandfather's voice lived in the margins. My father's refusal lived in the last note. Now my hand lived at the end. Outside, the hollow stayed still. No voices, no knocks, no scratching. But on my own porch that evening, when the light fell low, I found a new mark carved into the railing. Not diamonds, not lines, not circles. A single word, cut clean into the wood. Keeper.